Ever use like an app to report a pothole? And then suddenly you're like down this rabbit hole of where does that data even go?
Hmm.
Well, that's what we're diving into today. This whole world of public data ecosystems.
Hmm.
Like how did we go from those old dusty government ledgers with all the stats and figures to, I don't even know, something straight out of Star Trek.
Yeah, it's a wild ride when you think about it. And it's not just the tech that's changed, right? It's how we think about data itself.
Oh, okay, so how is so?
Well, it used to be this big secret guarded by the government, and now it's like,
It's what a weapon.
well, it could be, but it's more like this tool now for innovating, for making things more transparent, maybe even making the world better. Who knows?
All right, I'm intrigued, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But we're wading through some pretty dense stuff this time.
Hmm.
Academic papers, those policy reports, the usual. Before we get totally lost in all the jargon, can you give us a map to this jungle? What even is a public data ecosystem?
Okay, picture this. A rainforest, right? But it's all humming with life, everything connected.
Okay.
So in our data rainforest, you've got the data itself.
The trees.
Exactly. The trees, the animals, all of it. Then there's the tech stuff, the infrastructure that's like the soil, the climate, all that makes it work.
I'm with you.
And then, of course, you've got us, the people, governments, businesses, researchers,
Even little old me.
especially you. We're all in this ecosystem, using the data, influencing it, being influenced by wind Wyatt. It's a whole thing.
So it's not just about the data points themselves, it's how it all fits together.
Bingo.
This data rainforest didn't just pop up overnight, though, did it?
Oh, heck no. This paper we've got actually breaks it down into, get this, generations.
Generation.
Like we're talking about tech eras here. And each one, it marks this big shift in how the data was collected, how it was stored, shared, all of that.
Data's old enough to have generations, huh? Learn something new every day.
Right. So picture this, generation one, way back pre-internet.
Oh, man.
We're talking handwritten everything, those clunky old dot matrix printers.
Like you hear the sound now.
The data was, well, raw. Tech was limited, and governments, they're mostly using it internally. Like, this is our data, nobody else's business.
Data was basically a state secret back then. Not exactly the open data paradise we're all hoping for.
Right.
When did things start to get a little more .public?
Things got way more interesting when digital maps hit the scene. That was generation two, the spatial data infrastructure era.
Snappy name.
Catchy, right? Suddenly, governments realize, whoa, this spatial data stuff, this is powerful, especially for things like city planning, managing resources, you name it.
Yeah, makes sense. So
Yeah.
from paper maps to digital maps, seems obvious now, but I'm guessing that was a big deal at the time.
Huge EE. Game changer. Imagine being a city planner back then. Suddenly, bam.
Yeah.
You can analyze traffic, see where everyone's living, all with a few clicks. And then, as tech got better, internet took off. The push for e-government began.
E-government, is that like,
Government.
but with an E?
Basically. Generation 3 is all about getting info online, making it easier to find.
Ah, so this is where data starts coming out of hiding.
Yep. People wanted more transparency, more say in what was going on. We start to see this push to standardize data, make it available online. And this is where metadata comes in those little descriptions that tell you what the data actually means.
Because data without context is just numbers.
Exactly.
But just because data's online, that doesn't mean it's actually useful for, the average person.
Good point. You need the tools, the know-how.
Hmm.
Which brings us to Generation FOR, the dawn of open data. This is when we start seeing those open data portals popping up.
Like those websites where you can download government data. I've seen those.
Exactly. The idea was to encourage developers, anyone really, to build apps and services using, you guessed it, open data.
So from dusty old filing cabinets to apps that help us navigate, find the nearest park, even report that pothole that ruined our day, that's a big leap.
Huge E. And we're not done. Remember all that talk about big data?
Oh, yeah.
Generation 5 is when the data floodgates really open.
Okay, hit me.
This is the era of big data, linked data, and cloud computing. These things totally change how we manage and use data.
Okay, break that down for me. What is linked data?
Imagine different data sets all talking to each other, right?
Yeah.
Like connecting the dots between, say, weather patterns and traffic accidents.
Whoa.
Right. Plus, now you have international organizations getting involved, making it even more complex. Data's not confined to one country anymore.
It's gone global.
Precisely. And that brings new opportunities, but new challenges too. How do you protect data privacy on a global scale? How do you even begin to analyze all this interconnected data? These were the big questions of Generation 5.
Okay, so we've gone from carving data into stone tablets to, like, the Matrix in 5 generations. What's left for generation 6?
Get ready for the age of intelligent public data.
Ooh, now that sounds fancy. Intelligent data, you say? What's that all about?
Okay, imagine a city that uses AI to fix those potholes before they even form. Or think about personalized data experiences tailored just for you, all powered by public data. We're talking AI, machine learning, all that good stuff.
So data's gone from being this passive thing to, like, an active problem solver.
Exactly.
Wild. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back. What are the actual building blocks of these ecosystems? What makes them tick, regardless of what generation we're talking about?
Great question. Because if we understand the pieces, we can understand where we're going next.
So it's like building a house then. We need the right materials, the right builders,
Yeah,
and maybe a really good blueprint.
that's a good way to put it. So, what are the building blocks of our data house?
Yeah, let's break it down.
First up, you gotta have the data itself.
Makes sense.
But it's more than just like, here's a bunch of numbers. It's about what kind of data we have, right? Where did it come from? How accurate is it? What's it even about?
Right, because like having tons of data on, I don't know, penguin migration patterns isn't going to help me fix the traffic light on Main Street.
Exactly. Then there's a whole infrastructure piece, the tech stuff.
Yeah.
Platforms, tools, standards, all that makes the data usable.
The foundation of the house, basically.
You got it. And then we got to think about the data lifecycle itself. How do we collect it, publish it, share it, store it, all of that?
So many steps.
It's a process. And of course, you can't forget about data policy. That's where governments come in, setting the rules of the game.
Right, because someone's got to be in charge of the zoning permits and building codes for our data house, right?
Exactly. And we're not just talking about the physical building here. We got to think about the people too, the stakeholders.
Oh, right, because a house isn't a home without.
People. And in the data world, we've got a whole mix of folks. Governments, developers, researchers, regular citizens.
Wait, I'm a stakeholder. I just use apps to, like, find good restaurants.
You bet you are. We all are. Some of us produce data, some of us use it, some of us analyze it, but we're all connected by it. It's like
We're all living in the same data neighborhood.
Exactly. But to really thrive in this neighborhood, you need certain skills. Remember we talked about digital literacy?
Yeah, being able to, like, read and write data.
More than that, even. It's about being able to find data, evaluate it, use it critically. It's becoming as important as, like, knowing how to read a map or balance a checkbook these days.
Essential life skills for the 21st century. So we've got our building materials, our builders. What else makes this data ecosystem work? What's the final piece?
Processes. This is how we actually DO things with the data, how we go from raw information to, like, actual insights and action.
So it's not enough to just have you the data. We have to do something with it.
Exactly. But things can go off the rails pretty quickly without good governance.
Governance. Sounds a bit boring.
Maybe, but it's essential. Think of it like the
Excellent.
rules and structures that make sure the data is managed properly, that it's secure, private, all of that.
So zooming out, it's amazing how all these elements work together, right? It's like this whole hidden world that's already shaping so much of our lives.
It really is. And as we get deeper into this whole intelligent data thing, it's only going to get more complex, more powerful, and maybe a little more risky too.
Okay, now you've got me worried.
Sure.
What kind of risks are we talking about?
It's kind of like we're those explorers, right?
Yeah.
Stepping out into uncharted territory. Exciting, but a little scary too.
Totally. And just like those explorers, we got to be careful, right? Because this future we're building with all this data, we get to decide what it looks like.
So we're not just along for the ride, we're actually like shaping the route.
Exactly. It all starts with asking the right questions, like, what do we even want this data-driven world to be? How do we make sure it's a force for good?
Big questions. Where do we even start? Well, first we got to remember that tech, on its own, it's not good or bad. It's how we use it that matters.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like those 6 generations of data ecosystems we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Each one happened because of where the tech was what people needed, what they believed in.
So it's all connected.
Totally. And now, as we're getting into this intelligent data age, we got to be even more careful, think things through even more. We could solve some huge problems, right? Climate change, healthcare, even make our cities less annoying to live in.
Right. But it could go the other way, too. Like, what about data breaches? Or the AI just deciding, you know what, I don't like humans anymore.
Those are real worries, definitely. We need strong security, ethical guidelines for AI, all of that. But there are other risks too, trickier ones.
Oh, like what?
Well, how do we make sure this AI stuff is fair? that it doesn't just repeat the same old inequalities we already have.
Because, like you said before, AI is only as good as the data it learns from, right? And a lot of data out there, it's got problems.
Exactly. And that's just one thing. We got to think about privacy, transparency, who's accountable when things go wrong.
It's a lot to juggle. We want the good stuff data can do, but we got to be smart about it.
It's a team effort for sure. Governments, tech companies, researchers, and you know what? Regular people like us too.
So what can people listening do, besides stocking up on tinfoil hats, I mean?
Huh. Maybe hold off on the hat for now. But seriously, a few things. One, learn about data. The more you know how it works, the better you can spot problems, make good decisions.
Okay, so knowledge is power. Makes sense. Then what?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. When you see data being used anywhere, a news story, a government website, think about it. Where'd this come from? Who's telling me this and why? Could they be wrong?
Be a little skeptical.
Exactly. And last but not least, make your voice heard. Talk about this stuff with people, support groups, doing good work with data. Even tell your elected officials what you think.
So be informed, be skeptical, get involved. Because this whole data future, we're all building it together whether we realize it or not.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's in our hands, really.
Wow, that's a deep dive. To everyone listening, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions. We'll see you next time.